Bobby,
No,
it's good, Bobby. It's Phil. It's good to
yeah, me and him always the same. We connected at the hip.
it's good to have you here in the studio with us for a little while this afternoon.
It's good to be
And it's always interesting to allow you to take us on these voyages into the inner world of our spirit, because it has so many different dimensions. I had the pleasure of speaking with Sister Sabonfu, Meladoma's wife, and she dealt in the world of the African before the European, and she talked about ritual, and it sounded a lot like magic when she talked about her village and the rituals and the reason for rituals, and then going into rituals, they were able to go into other worlds. And what I saw was that African people lived in an entirely different world. The one thing I found that I wish she had dealt with more forcefully with, and this is what I was going to say to you downstairs, is that I asked her to describe more or less the spirit that we're dealing with. Obviously, this European is not the same as we are, and he has brought both death to our physical world as we know it, even destroyed our mental capacity to see our world as we saw it, by taking away our language, our culture, and that was really forcefully done. But we are dealing with death to our world and to us. And I asked her if she would describe what kind of spirit we're dealing with. And I want to ask you the same question, because she did say that we were dealing with the spirit of death, you know, of destruction, that it was not. It was a completely alien spirit. But then when I asked her, how would we kill it, she laughed and she said we would have to heal it. And that's what we parted company. But I mean, that's
it's the same thing, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, all right. What are we dealing with? And I'm asking you the same question. First, though, what are we really dealing with? It is not us. It's not the same. How different is it? Why is it different? And talk about that differences.
Well, you have to just take it in stages. You said something very pertinent about ritual. And ritual is the device by which we focus or transcend or cross over from what is temporal to what is trans-temporal. In other words, ritual is the bridge to the realm of myth. And the realm of myth is actually the true history of the spirit. See, the Caucasoid locks us into this physical illusionary history and tells you that myth is something that is the machination or the creation of the imagination of our humanity, when actually it is actually the interpretation by the spirit of its own physical adventure. So when we do ritual, we cross the bridge between the realm of illusion and into the interpretation that the spirit has of the physical world. And we were living more in the spiritual world because as a people we were more into ritual. And thus by that we had a greater ability to see things before they happened. Because in the realm of myth or in the realm of the metaphysical worlds, all things physical are the byproduct of the metaphysical world. So we lived in the world of metaphysics. We lived in the trans-temporal world, and we crossed the bridge from our illusion back to our reality when we did ritual. The spirit of what it is that you say, how do you kill the spirit? And she says, well, you kill it by healing it. She's right. When we heal ourselves of our focus into and participation, or the need to participate in the world of illusion that he continues to keep and refining and continue to keep making more pleasant and appealing for us to participate in, once we secede or retract our participation in the world as he is giving it to us, his world crumbles. Once we begin to transcend the temporal world that he has fashioned and go into the trans-temporal world through our rituals, we begin to connect up to a whole other universe of realities that our ancestors first laid down. Now you have to also look at it. He is another creature frequency. He is another creative frequency identity. He is, just to, I don't know, he has offended us in the past by our blackness. So I'm going to reverse that field and talk about something that would look like it's offensive, but it is offensive. When the Caucasoid studies diseases, he sees that most of the diseases that start up as a result of the incursion of white blood cells. White blood cells actually come into play in your body when a disease is present. So let's look at that scenario. When the white man came to prominence, obviously the body of the black consciousness must have been diseased. So the only way that a disease or a response to the disease could take over a whole body is if that body was somehow in decay to begin with. So the natural progression to a diseased state would be nature responding the way she does in microcosm as she does in macrocosm. So if we look at a microcosmic response to diseases as the evidence of leukocytes or white blood cells, as we call them, they become evident when you see disease happening. Now, overload of these white blood cells would create leukemia. So you see people die from leukemia because there's an overload of white blood cells. For instance, when you eat a piece of pork, your white blood cell count rises to the level of a person who has leukemia. That's correct. So if you eat a piece of pork and you wait for a while and then draw blood, there will be enough leukocytes and white blood cells in your system that if nobody knew any better, they would say that you have a leukemic situation. So something had to happen to the physical reality of what we call people of color, our melanated brothers and sisters. It either had to be the ending of a time, or the wearing out, or the end result, or the epilogue. Let's just say this. The epilogue to our spiritual journey in the flesh as people of color was our cessation from the illusions that we were participating in. And as that body died for our lack of participation in it, in came the white man. And just like any other destructive cancerous cells, because if you look under the microscope, you would look at the white man, you would look at the cancer cell, and you would see that it was white. So if all cancer cells in microcosm are white, if all things that are dead show up to be, and we don't even call him white, I call him recessive. So they're not the white people, they're recessives. And we call them by what they are by classification. They are recessives. They are the recessive component of humanity. And they cannot be, or they cannot create a dominant structure. They can only create a destructive structure because they come from a recessive strain. So a recessive strain cannot create a dominant consciousness that will take us forward. You're right when you're saying, what is this spirit? The spirit is our lack of attention to this plane. I believe that our ancestors went forward to a whole other reality, and that a lot of us were the rear guard to keeping this realm stable so that the journey to a mentor could go along smoothly. We took the brunt of the disease that came upon this planet to make it, to block the entrance for the disease to come any further than us. We had to take everything that this Caucasoid took at us because our people before us had to set up a structure, had to set up a consciousness place, had to set up a territory, a village, had to put down stakes in a whole other reality that we are yet to inherit. And when we do make our going across, whenever we say our going home rituals, I believe that there's a whole other resonance that we go and participate in than he does. I don't see him participating in the same resonant zone of consciousness as our people, because I believe you go where your experience takes you. Mm-hmm. And I believe that whatever your experience are, you can quantify experience under suffering. You say all those who suffered would have to go here. All those who have not felt any suffering in their life would have to go there, because you go according to your energy merit. This Caucasoid, this recessive, has come to play or come to being because whatever it is that we left after our great societies were in crumbling, were in fall, were coming down, all of that was a transitional phase for us to go to the next phase of our consciousness. He had to come in just like any other scavenger and do what he could to set up what was left.
Now, more specifically, perhaps you can describe him so that we will see him and perhaps understand a physical manifestation of this.
That's interesting.
But can you describe it in a way that we can get a better picture?
Yeah, it would have to us going back to his, to studying his behavioral traits, going way back. I mean, back to the Vikings, back to where it is that he claims he comes from.
And when was that?
And that's in the code. We're not even going to look at his charts. He came from the code. Time, as far as we know as time, his time started when he began to know that there was other parts of the world. Now, it was funny how the Europeans have this thing where they say they've studied Christopher Columbus and found out that he just found out, and the group found out there was a whole other world other than Europe. Yet still, if you go back into the archives of our people in Africa, even the ones over here in the Americas, they knew about all of other civilizations living on the other side. They had an interconnection. And he was the only one that seems to have been isolated and had to now reach out to the rest of the world to find his place in this whole mosaic. There are no pyramids in Europe. He never put down any stakes for pyramids. He never built any temples. The temples you see in Greece were built by the Africans. The places in China, all done by people of color. Everywhere he goes on this planet to look for himself, he keeps bumping into us. So he has no place. Okay, let's look at his behavior before that. The history of his behavior has been put down by his own people. He talks about us being savages, but he did not recognize a high spiritual culture when he first saw it. He came upon Africans, he came upon so-called Native Americans all around, and he saw, well, they're just there in their skins, or they're just there in huts, or they're just dressed in this. He did not recognize a high spiritual technology. That's it. So he, in his own consolidated, isolated, calcified consciousness, began to make an assessment of the world based upon his own reptilian reaction to it. And that he's functioning from his reptilian brain, not from his frontal lobes where our ancestors functioned from, but he functioned from his lower brain, which meant egotism, a kind of consolidated, quantified form of culture that saw no room for anything else. That was his mentality. And you take that mentality now and you try to fit it into the broader world view of the fact that the world was a unit, a nature that was part of everything and everything a part of it. He did not have that. He came into the world thinking that he had to conquer because he came from a world where his survival was based on conquest.
Are you saying he is physically and spiritually and mentally different from the African?
Completely in the fact that his whole calcified view of the world, the fact that his pineal, the fact of his lack of melanin, the fact that he has calcification around a component of the brain that was necessary for intercommunication with nature. If that's calcified, even if he did get information coming through that instrument, it would still have been distorted based on the calcification. And you remember, calcium is an electrical conductor. But if the calcium is not structured in a proper crystalline matrix and lattice, you get a distorted picture of everything. So even the use of calcium was overbearing because the calcium shut down his pineal gland. His skin no longer had any form of color to be able to pick up light and to translate light as information. Mm-hmm. So if you can't pick up light from the very source of life, which is the sun, and translate that into the inspiration that would come from light codes, then you are now functioning from pure instinct, from pure reptilian brain perception. Mm-hmm. He now takes that and he forms a culture around that reptilian mentality. Mm-hmm. And he is now struck out because some news have come to him that there are worlds and lands beyond him. I don't understand. You think about this. How could you look up at a full moon and believe that you live on a flat earth?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you didn't connect the two together.
But that's what I'm saying.
You didn't see one as a replica of.
That's what I'm saying.
The other one.
He had no interconnectionness with the fact that if that's what's there, then they would probably looking back at us this way. He thought that the world, the earth, was the center of the universe and that the sun moved around him. So his whole understanding of the mosaic didn't come until he began to strike out and find his identity amongst those who lived the identity of spirit. Nothing spiritual ever came out of Europe. Nothing. So anything that he claims to be spiritual about himself, he took based upon a second-hand participation and experience with peoples of color. And as you look at him today and what he has shown us, you are looking at a man that over the last 500 years began to find his humanity and his interconnectedness with everything on this planet based upon his interfacing and interplay with peoples of color. Mm-hmm. He has not known humanity until he understood and began to see what humanity was in a working dynamic. Because you look at where he came from. He was the true savage. He was more of a sophisticated savage. He learned how to deal with his own disease state by coming up in disease. That's why he is so preoccupied with that which is deformed. With that which is, where we as Africans would drown a deformed baby knowing that that child could come back into another spirit. Mm-hmm. He would nurture the deformity because there was something in him that he knew genetically and psychologically that was already deformed. And Dr. Francis Cress Welsing put it very well when he said that the white skin was related to that story of Adam and Eve. That when he saw he was naked was actually the loss of his actual spectrum, his ability to see his color, and his relatedness to the world of color, where everything around us is based on programming, based on color. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So to look at him now where he is, now that he's had a chance to participate, to assimilate, to, like a vampire, draw the blood of civilization into his own veins, he now has the semblance of a human. Hueman. Mm-hmm. You see? But who he is, he keeps slipping back to. Now here I have a problem with. I have a problem with the Caucasian writing all of the New Age information to tell me that somehow everything is all right now, it's all been paid, we can move forward into a higher level of spirituality. That is completely off the hook for me, because everyone knows that there is a cause and effect. There is always something that has to happen as a result of the action coming from one place. There has to be an effect coming from another. In the literature today, where people are reading thousands of books by the New Age people talking about the spiritual ascension and how our DNA is going to get its 12th helix and all of this nonsense, I'm trying to figure out that how is the most deficient, degenerated, recessive, and completely anemic and colorless creature on the planet going to be given keys, biological keys, that, and the natural order of progression, remember, because he says that all of his technology is light-based. All of the new technologies coming out is going to be light-based. If he, by his own very biological nature, is one who reflects light, who cannot absorb light, who cannot even stand under the one natural lamp that the Most High has put up for us, how is he going to presume to know what it is that all of this is going to mean when the time comes for us to make that quantum shift? He is speculating based upon what he is studying of us. But the components he gathers in the form of information cannot be quantified and then synthesized into the wisdom necessary for us to understand what it is that's getting ready to happen. The only people that can do that have been the interpreters of spirit all along, and that's us. We interpret spirit for him through our music, through our dance, through the very language. Even though perverted, we have brought the soul to his very language. We have put the life into his communication. And he knows that. That's why our music is the one that is the popular music. The music that everyone can identify with. Because we are the original ones. He knows that. And he can't communicate spirit the way we do. He didn't even write the, for instance, Mozart. Mozart simply put his name on what was then Moorish music. You see, he belonged to a secret society over there. And what they would do is study the old Moorish paradigm to begin to fill up the gap that had happened, especially in the Renaissance. The Renaissance was actually going to the East to pull out the information that was suppressed in the West. That's all it was. And I wouldn't even call it the West, because the Caucasoid or the recessive is not from a Western culture. We got to really re-identify that. I believe that Western society, as we know it, perished when Columbus came here.
Correct.
So we have to look at him as a Nordic society, as an Iceman society, and really identify him for who he is, because he has insinuated himself into the identification or the languaging, and has placed himself based on language into specific categories of identification. And by him placing himself in those spaces of identification, we now, on a very humble and very nonchalant, we embrace his identification of himself, and then we apply that to our dialogue. And he is not a Western civilization. He is not even a civilization, because even our high priest, Dr. John Henry Clark, said the operative word in civilization is civil. And he has never been civil. So he does not have a civilization. He has an imposition of activities that he imposes upon people that he meets. But he doesn't civilize anyone. He hasn't even civilized himself.
You said a little earlier that our ancestors transitioned this plane and went to prepare a world to receive us, but some stayed behind to take on this Caucasoid, etc. But I just, doesn't that sound a little bit like the Bible? I shall go and prepare a place for you, and ain't that kind of like life after death, and ain't that kind of like looking into heaven for a better place and not dealing politically with the realities down here. How do you juxtapose that in a way of winning the battle here on earth?
Well, the Bible, again, is a mutilated version of our mythos. So if you see them talking about going to prepare a place, it doesn't mean that our ancestors did not write it. It's just that he's interpreting it differently. Going to prepare a place simply means that there is a condition of thought, a condition of being that we must ascend to by our disconnection from participation here. The metaphysics of a reality is based upon how you participate in your perception of that reality. The reality becomes reinforced by your thought process and how thought is used to reinforce the reality. We as people of color, or I would say the last guard, the ones who were left here to receive back whatever it is in our interpretation, to be the gatekeepers so that nobody else can get through this shit unless they were prepared. We as the gatekeepers of that information, we have been told, or we have been given by this language a whole new identification process for reality. We were stripped of the language that decoded reality for us.
Correct.
By that stripping, we were now given a reality that was based upon a calcified pineal gland. The language is based upon that type of thing. It does not have, like what the Dogon says, the 3-4 sides to a particular... When you say a sentence, the Caucasoid or the recessive looks at the sentence and he just looks at the front view. He doesn't look at the side or the back or the top or the bottom of that sentence. And that there are 3 and 4 dimensions to that. When I say go forward and not dealing with political reality, the political reality is the illusion. And by our dealing with it, we reinforce it. When you pull the plug on this machine, can it work anymore?
Not without
the power source. The power source is your attention. The Caucasoid, the recessive, needs our attention. He is constantly vying to keep you focused on him.
What does that do? How does that...
That's the beauty of the metaphysics.
Him?
Do you realize that you can... Do you know that you can inflict pain on a child? When you see a child doing something of mischief in the corner, and you look at a child with a specific glare, do you know that you've sent an energy right to that child's eyes and that child's brain? And that maybe about another 3 to 4 days from then, the child's nose will start running, the child will start sniffling. That evil eye energy. The value of attention is that whatever information I put in is overloading your circuits so that the chemistry of the brain is preoccupied with what was just put in as the information. The chemistry of the brain cannot switch attention if the attention of the eyes and the brain is not taken away from what has been forced to pay attention to. So your very chemistry, the very enzymes, the very electrical and magnetic input and output of your mind is being constantly preoccupied with an overload and saturation of bullshit information. So whatever it is that keeps coming in, the body has to keep calibrating, keep like a stew inside, keep cooking the proper chemicals so that the memory and whatever it is you want to put in your mind becomes lodged in, and all the chemistry for higher consciousness, all the chemistry for what you would use to figure out what the real deal is, all being preoccupied on well, let's just use it for instance.
Well, let's look at television and throw television in and the damage it does and what it does. Watching, because black people watch a lot of television.
But they don't watch it intelligently. They watch it as because they don't understand that it's going right past the filter of their discrimination. The discrimination filter is right past it. The discrimination between what is relevant and what is not relevant no longer there. Because everything, the overload now, you've become so hypnotized by the overload that they just punched through your resistance. And what I was saying, say like you say Calgon lotion or Tide, all of these, you have a saturation of information, and your chemistry is being overloaded with all kinds of bullshit information, non-essential, that when it comes to you to try to sit down and concentrate, the chemistry of the mind, just like the camera, it takes, like you want to develop a picture, for instance. When you develop a picture, it's just something that's on a film, right? And you put it in there, and you want to put it on a, say, on a piece of paper. You got to do whatever you do to put the piece of paper in, and then what you do is you got to put it through what? A series of chemicals before you can develop it. Well, that's the same thing with your memory. Your body, your memory goes through all this so that you begin to develop the picture, to file it in the inventory of your mind. Now, what they're doing is using what would be a developing mechanism for higher consciousness and learning. They are overloading it with all kind of bullshit information. And then what you do is you can't abide by silence anymore. You have been so drugged by the chemistry of your body, constantly processing bullshit information, that the drug of processing information makes you seek out distractions. Whereas when I shut down everything, and I say, no more this, boom, we're not going to talk, we're not going to do, we're going to sit still, you bug out. Because you've been programmed to take in, to have input constantly. So you have no time to think about your condition. All you are doing is reacting, reacting, reacting. What does he do when you don't pay attention anymore? He shoots 2 or 3 of our brothers in the streets. He got your attention now. When you say, well, you look like you want to go off into another direction, and we're going to raise up, we're going to buy another direction, and we're going to raise up, we're going to buy our own land, get our own crop. He does something over here. It is constantly to take your attention off of what the real deal is, and that is giving him the attention. When you draw your attention from him, when we shut down all our lights, like I said at the last gathering, you shut down all your lights, you don't go to work for 2 or 3 weeks. You say in your mind, I do not want to live this way, so I will die according to my own rules and regulations. I will no longer live the way he wants me to live, so that he can thrive and flourish. Once I pull the plug on everything, I know there are going to be some casualties. But what's going to happen to him when I don't pay attention to him anymore? His true nature will come out. He will either have to beat us on the head and start eating us, which will then show him his own savagery, because right now his savagery is contained. Everything in the news has a censor, and the censor is the news anchor man. He is telling you what you're supposed to see, even though you're looking at the picture and you can get another interpretation. When you look at the news, shut the voice off and look at the news without the voice, and you'll see 2 different things. So he is interpreting your world for you because he's got you paying attention. And if you interpret the world the way he hasn't told you it is, that means he's got your attention. So if you're looking at the fact that black people got a whole lot of problems because white people is this, and because y'all don't do this, and y'all got a lot of crime, and y'all parrot that same thing, boom, he's got your attention. Because that's not what's real.
And that attention gives him life?
Gives him life and power. Because just like any other vampire, he needs the light of your attention to survive.
That's a pretty heavy statement. In other words, you were saying it is our energy focused on him. But then how would you explain him coming into Africa and totally conquering Africa, so much that he was not in the interior of Africa, and yet we sold ourselves and raided ourselves and helped him bring us to destruction?
You have to remember that everything that's done, if you speed it up, fast forward it, you will see it. There's almost an intelligence at work. Now, I remember people say, well, damn, you think we needed to be slaves? No. Remember I said at the beginning that all diseases, when a body goes through disease, let's just talk about your physical body. When your body goes through a disease, it's going through a process. And you, by the process, based on the way the white or the Caucasoid or the recessive works, he wants you to hurry up to the process because he wants to put you back on his timetable. But disease is a process of health. And that the way that you defeat disease is by allowing it to come out. That's the secret. The secret is the barbarism and the madness and the New World Order and all that. That's the pimple getting ready to be raised up on the skin. You ain't know what's underlying in your body until the body raises that pimple to the surface. Then you know you got problems in your body. Mm-hmm. This Caucasoid is the zit of the planet. And everything he has done, he has taken violence, mayhem, and chaos to a new and scientific level, which intrinsically was what was actually begun by our lack or misdirection or misapplication of our spiritual selves. Mm-hmm. So we say, well, the black people created? Yes, we created him. Because whatever it is that we did to forget who we really were, ended up being him. Because who is he except everything that we have forgotten about ourselves? Or what we really refuse to face in ourselves and refuse to do. So now, if we don't realize that the attention is not him, the attention to the disease, for instance, somebody says, a good friend of mine, not really good, but a very close acquaintance in what I did back in the natural healing world when I was with Heal Thyself. She just passed away of what was cancer. We look at the localized area of the body. For instance, if you have cervical cancer, and we look at cervical cancer, and immediately, according to the Caucasoid or the recessives, they attack where the disease expressed itself, and then they even give a name to it, cervical cancer. But it's not cervical cancer. That is just the place where the body chose to exteriorize the mental process that destabilized the body's homeostasis and brought it out at that area. This is where most of the thought processes would have localized itself in order for it to have worked itself out. But it is the total body. It is the total body we're speaking about. So when you bring that full circle, it is not the white man as being the problem. It is us, the total body of the black man, that needs to be dealt with on a whole, not in a fragmented level. But what you do is, the distraction is the cervical cancer. So we look at the cervical cancer not realizing the cause of the problem was what was being done to the total body in the first place.
I think this might be a good place. I want to come back to some other issues. In particular, I want to deal with the last gathering of the masters down in Atlanta, but I want to hold that to the end. But I think this is a good place to segue into health. I actually, to look at health, we were talking over the phone, and you were explaining how the African, more or less, we dealt with the tree. And if the tree was actually drawing all of the nutrients from the earth, and pretty soon it would deplete. Well, the earth does become depleted of minerals when you oversaturate it with a particular plant or so forth. But you explained something I thought was extremely important, and I want to tie that into what you were saying right now in terms of the whole body health and this mental health being expressed through, degenerate condition. But looking at light, who we are, how we take in nurture, what is this body and how does it function in terms of its organs and its nutrition, its electromagnetic fields, and etc. I just found what you were saying was extremely different and interesting, and perhaps we can talk about it.
You said something about the tree. We can go back to the scenario of the tree, and we think that the tree.
Yeah, we were looking at those big redwoods, so I identify the tree so you get a better picture.
Better picture it, yeah. And for the people who would view this tape, to understand that we are not made of food, and that another part of our misuse of attention, for want of a better phrase, is that we are somehow creatures of food. That without food, we don't live. And that, of course, is part of the illusion. That's part of the recessive paradigm. Why I say that is because if you look at the dynamics of a tree, as we explained before, something like a redwood that's the size of this room or twice the size of this room, you could drive a truck through one of the trunks. If you look around at the ground that that redwood has grown in, there are no indentations or no removal of soil. No depletion of soil, nothing, but yet still you have a 300-foot tree, which is enormous. How is that? Well, the principle of life is not what the recessive paradigm has factored it or perceived it to be. When a tree is in the ground, three things are in operation. First of all, the life form itself and how it processes life to become life. It is a seed, and once planted in the ground, certain electromagnetic energies triggers its potential within. Okay, that potential has a genetic coding that makes it operate unconsciously and automatically in a specific way. It automatically begins to set down roots by which to anchor itself. Once it has anchored itself, it begins to sprout its way through the surface of the soil and then begin to use what we see as water and sunshine to begin to grow. Now, our perception is that somehow this tree, who has planted down roots, is taking minerals from the soil in order to grow. And that it's taking water from the soil in order to grow. And that with sunshine, water, and the minerals from the soil, this tree grows. No. Because we are not taught life and the dynamics of that invisible component of life, we are looking at the surface, we are looking at the illusion, we are looking at the veneer, what the Kabbalah expresses as the clip-off, which is nothing more than the shell. And we are identifying a whole science around a series of shells and surface perceptions. The anchor of the root in the ground is simply to anchor the living entity in the ground so that it sets up an electromagnetic current or a circuit in order to get the real food that it was meant to nurture itself on, and that is air and light. When the roots are anchored in the ground, what you see as the minerals simply is there to set up the charge so that the conduction of electricity is more proficient. So minerals are not there to give any kind of nutrition. It's simply there to set up the charge for you to conduct life and light through the breath and through the light. It is a way for channeling that electromagnetic current more efficiently through the body that is being created. But if it was about eating the minerals, then the whole soil would have been destroyed around that tree. You see, it is not that the minerals are actually created. The minerals for the tree are created by the sun and the air and the water that is falling down. The water is simply the conductor. Making sure that what is inert in the inorganic materials, when the water hits the inorganic materials, that is the conduit. That's the conductor for whatever electromagnetic energy needs to get up into the tree. That's all it is. But the life component that's there in that tree is not in that ground, because if it was, how is it that there are minerals in the leaves, minerals in the bark, and minerals on the stems that don't exist in the ground? See? They're not thinking, what made those minerals in the leaves that don't appear in the ground? Now you say that it needs the minerals. No, it only needs a couple of minerals, because the minerals that it needs to set up the charge. That's all it needs. Once it breaks through the surface, its next and only thing it needs is the sun and the air.
And water.
Yeah, the water will. Is just to make sure that the electromagnetic connection that it has to the earth is being conducted in there, so it can anchor itself to the earth to get its real food source. It becomes conscious of itself by the amount of room it has. It even battles for space with other trees. Now you take that particular philosophy and you understand how that works, and you see the human being, which is no farther from the tree, because in the Hindu we are called Saptapana, which means man plant. So as a man plant, our first and foremost quote unquote nutrition was the sun. All minerals that you see made, all plants, everything alive that has an organic reality gets its life from the sun. Let's break down what the sun is. The sun, light. What is light? You break it down into photons, electrons, atoms, protons. Do they eat? No. The sun doesn't eat. Nothing eats that is light. It is simply a variation on the theme that we call God. And that variation on the theme is you as well. But your focus of attention has created such an envelope of ignorance that you eat and participate in the reality of your own creation. So the original cell that created you, what they identify in doctors identify as the germ cell, that's the original seed component that brought you into being, and that had nothing to do with food. Your sperm cell ain't got nothing to do with food. The egg cell ain't got nothing to do with food. And those are the two original seeds that you come from. When you grow up into being a baby in that stomach, that ain't got nothing to do with food. Everything your mother takes in is to just set the charge so that the breath that your mother is breathing in, which contains all the solar energy that is in the air, she's breathing that in and creating you. Now when you come out, you begin to nurture certain addictions that the society and the culture gives you. And you begin to eat according to that, and that's when you create another body. The other body is called the soma body, S-O-M-A. That somatic body now is the body that eventually ages and dies. Because if you look at your nerves of a 98-year-old person, the nerves of a 98-year-old man is the same as a 10-year-old child. What is aging? What is aging and dying is the somatic body. The somatic body is a body that's made of psychological problems.
The body is made of psychological problems?
The somatic body that ages and gets diseases. The somatic body that goes through all the changes that we call illness and pathologies. That somatic body is built up on the cultural identification of pain, joy, pleasure, suffering. And you train the appetites of the cells, and the cells create each other according to the appetites that you create.
Other words, and I've heard Dr. Amos Wilson say this, is that when we come into our true selves, real liberation, our bodies will change.
Oh yes. In a twinkling of an eye.
We will not have these bodies.
Nope. And that's why I wanted Doc with me before he made his going over. Because we spoke for a while on the phone. He said, brother, I like to eat. He said, you a little too strict for me. And I said, but elder, we want you here. We want you here. And this is it's a discipline of you not participating and throwing your perception and attention into the somatic body, which is the death body, which is the lust body, which is the body that the Hindus call the kama rups, which means the body of lust. And the body of lust wants that ice cream, wants that chicken leg, that's the body that you've created, and that's the body that will die. But if you recede from that and you take less, you gain more. And that's the reverse psychology, the reverse illusion of this planet. The less you take in, the more life you process. The more you take in, the less connected you are with life around you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there may be a switch in the circuitry where some people defy that. Mm-hmm. But then they're just on automatic pilot. They're not receiving the true sense of the movement of spirit. They are just going on the memory of what they experienced before they came to that state, which is different.
When we look at the soma body,
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about light, we're not getting away from it, because
Right.
the Egyptians looked at the personality, for less of a better word, but the human entity as a fourfold construction.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the Ka, the Ba, the Kaaba.
Mm-hmm.
But couldn't you break that
Resh.
down? And
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people have the question of soul. What is soul? What is spirit? How do they enter? What are we? And I think maybe if we can look at the Egyptian concepts of how we are made up, we might begin to understand it, and we can see where the soma body you were talking about
Mm-hmm.
from ancient texts is just one body of many bodies that we have.
Yes, it is.
So
But
maybe
it's
you
the
could
lower
explain.
body. It's the lowest body. It's the body that needs the redemption. You see, the soma body is the body to be redeemed.
What are the other bodies? And maybe you can connect them with.
There are many different bodies, that are based on vibratory rates outside of our perception.
Mm-hmm.
But there are one egg, as Don Juan says, this egg of awareness. And just like in any other, for instance, white light breaks down into sevenfold colors,
Mm-hmm.
we break down into 7 colors as well, or 7 energy grids that make up the physical composite that you see. The soul is simply a template of the experience of the spirit in flesh. It is the intermediary energy. It is the step-down matrix before the physical form. It is the library of experience for the spirit in the flesh, on matter, in the material world. And it becomes a weight to the spirit, because if it goes through the realm of matter, it becomes extremely polluted. Because matter and spirit are connected by the thread of thought. And that thought is processed. The experience of the thoughts are processed upon the soul. And whatever is on the soul comes out on the physical body. You see. Mm-hmm. So the physical body and the soul are connected, because that is where the soul spirit works its experience in matter out of itself. It goes in for experience. Mm-hmm. This whole thing that we're doing right here, you and me, the billions of others around us, is just in here for the experimentation of spirit. We are just here to participate in tangible things. It is only through here do we begin to elevate and become greater in the light, because unless you have gone down into the realm of matter, unless you have partaken of the infinite mother, which is matter, you would not know who you are. So the Father has to be seated in matter before the Father realizes the dual side of itself. And that's the resurrected Son, Heru. Okay? So if you look at the story of Osiris and Isis and Horus, which are the Greek names for Osar, Oset, and Heru, Set destroyed Osiris, encased him in a coffin, or in a casing that he created specifically for him. Set represents what is called the Merkaba programming for our soul, for our spirit. So the trapping of Osiris is the trapping of the knowledge, the all pure knowledge of self in relationship to God as self and self as God, into this box we call matter. Isis is the mother who has the consciousness of Osiris, her husband, and she now goes seeking him. And who she represents now is the spirit of man seeking to, the physical man without the soul, seeking to redeem the soul within itself in matter, because she represents matter. So she is trying to find the spirit so she could release and interface herself with the spirit. Now she finds the coffin after it was encased inside of a tree. And there go that tree again. The tree of life. She takes the coffin, and then when the body is laying there dead, she does some magic to get the dick hard, stops on it, and then boom, here comes Heru. Heru is the son of a dead man. So what does that tell you? Who's the only dead man here on this planet walking around? It's us. That's why the white or the Caucasoid woman is so preoccupied with the black male. That's why everybody is taking a piece of the 14 pieces that after that, remember Set destroyed Osiris because he found out what Isis had done. So he found the body, got it, and chopped that shit up into 14 pieces and scattered it. Now, you see the women. You remember Isis said, let me get all my sisters and you go out into the land and help me find these pieces. Well, this is why we're so fucked up now, because what the women doing now when they find the pieces of Osiris? Instead of bringing the bad boy to put them back together, she's using the piece. So the spirit of Osiris, which is supposed to be resurrected in the male, who's supposed to now come back and take over the throne so that she can stand behind him and support both of them, she's over there using the piece she found in careers and doing her thing to play football and box and shit. This is not the realm and the time of a woman. Everybody talking we're going into a female time for our female. No, that's bullshit. If that was the case, then why are all the women acting like men? We are not going into a female time. We are going into a time of the resurrected sun, which is Heru. And unless them females start bringing all the pieces back and resurrecting their men, and giving them back the dick that they had. Remember, they couldn't fight. They got all the pieces together except the dick. And she had to go and fashion a golden one for him. And that's what she's doing. She's using it for herself, on herself, and for herself.
How do you believe that?
Well, you see her.
I mean, you're going to get a lot of sisters at this point. Well, they've been following us up to this point.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going to get them more pissed off.
You're losing a lot of them.
No, it's all right. But a lot of them need to be lost. Like Oprah, their queen. So what happened is, we got caught up, the sisters got caught up in becoming Osiris rather than resurrecting Osiris.
So you're saying now the sisters out here now who's saying, I can do it on my own, I don't need no man, I can raise my children, my son. What I need a brother for?
That's right. Now she's just as crazy as she wants to be. Now you're going to see a backlash to that because the sisters are now craving to be with men. I'm getting it every day now. They know that something is wrong. The sisters who still got their own senses and their own instincts know something is wrong with the picture the way it is. You see, they've been hoodwinked by this recessive. And the recessive sicked his woman on everybody else, especially our woman. And now our woman is acting just like his woman. She's taking on recessive traits. She keeps boiling and oiling her hair till it's straighter than even the Chinese. And you can't get hair straighter than that. You see what I'm saying? Then you got, see, the whole story of Osiris has been twisted. All the sisters got a piece of Osiris and they all acting like Osiris. They're going out there and assuming the roles of men. What else is that except assuming the role of Osiris? And Osar. And they say, well, what is it? The sisters have to be the one that's doing it, and they went out to get the body of Osiris, and maybe that's what it is. No, it ain't that. The resurrection of Osar means that you have to resurrect the balance in nature. You can't balance yourself by acting like a man. You have to stabilize yourself. And I can definitely tell you that the sisters have taken the golden lingam and they're using it as the dildo on themselves because the incidence of lesbianism in black women today is off the charts. It is off the chart in Atlanta and in California. And every brothers are saying, sister, can we go ahead and get it on, be with me or my woman? Well, I have another relationship with this sister. And that's what they're running into wholesale down there now. So you're going to tell me that this Osar situation is not off the hook? It's off the hook now. These sisters are bugging out. They don't know what to do with themselves. Now they're fucking each other, and they're dealing with each other, eating each other. That is Osiris going crazy because you started to imbibe and take on the traits of Osiris.
Now, this is generated and perpetuated by whom and how?
Well, the interpretation. Remember, if you have the very person that's supposed to be working for the gathering of the pieces of our fragmented self to create the Osa energy, which is essentially to actually manifest the redeeming or the redeeming energy within you. The redemption is based upon a balance of energy, a new energy. The only way that the so-called redemption energy is going to come through is if the resurrected body of Osa and that which is the perfected body of Oset, or Ast, comes together. And the only way that you're going to create the redemption or the redeemer, which is within, is by bringing those two components together. But they must act in their capacity. Osiris can't act like Isis. He can't start donning on a skirt and start walking around to do the work of Isis. And Isis can't switch roles with Osiris. There are definite, if we're going to be working in the realm of matter, and we are dealing in the realm of matter, matter has specific rules of gender. And the specific rules of gender are not there to be interpreted based upon our own deficient and perverted sense of reality. And because we are listening and acting like the Caucasoid, we have a perverse and completely mutilated sense of ourselves and reality. In fact, we have created a mutation of a reality. A mutated reality that's based upon his own mutated self. And now if you have people adopting that world paradigm and that worldview, what else is that except our sisters now adopting the philosophy of his recessive mate and acting like her, taking on power, becoming Osiris, and then actually letting the body of Osiris...
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want you to continue because this is where I wanted to get to. You're saying that our sisters reflecting, acting like the man and taking on the male energy, but there's a relationship between that energy and a condition with the European are being used by the European as an instrument to further destroy the black male. Maybe you can tie that in somehow. But would you please continue?
Sure. The use, or actually the misinterpretation of energies, or the light codes and the instructions within the light codes for our genetic, our spiritual, our soul, our physiological redemption is being misinterpreted because the one who is doing the interpretation is the Caucasoid. And even if he is doing the interpretation and helping himself with it, he is now giving out a spectrum of information to our sisters who, by conditioning, has been trained to see that paradigm as what they need to adopt in order to survive or to feel the sense of themselves. Of course, it's a pathology. It's just like any thirsty man goes and drinks polluted water when there's nothing else left. That's what's been happening. We have been taking in and feeding from and trying to find ourselves through the perceptual matrix of a pathological being. Until we step back from that behavior and disconnect ourselves from the habit of his culture, because it's a drug. We are duped and asleep. It's like Osiris. We, as the black man, the only person that's dead here is the black man. That's why everybody wants to be us. The fragmented body of Osa is the fact that the black man is still dead in the eyes of everybody. You look at everything right now. Everybody's doing his music except him. Everybody is gaining the accolades except him, and he's regulated to this newfound or this old, well, actually it's just nothing but a new interpretation of the gladiator ring, football, basketball.
Correct.
He is nothing more than a gladiator. And who he was as the builder of empires, as the father of the planet. His mother now and his wife belongs to the disease now. It is her. If she now can pull her attention and her addiction, as well as her dependence upon this, away from him, we can then resurrect the body of Osar. But Set has her now.
When you say pull it away from him, you mean from the white man?
Yeah, from the recessive.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because remember, any information we get from him is recessive. Mm-hmm. He says, well, look what we just discovered. We just discovered this new star in the galaxy. The only way you could have discovered it is if it was, depending on its distance, it had to be 10 or 50 light years from then. That means that thing, the light you got is 150,000 years old. Mm-hmm. Where is your time frame reference? Mm-hmm. We're not there. I don't see time according to the context anymore. I've stepped out of this white man's illusion. Mm-hmm. So I've stepped out of the game and the rules that he has set down, even though he does not want me to know that his rules are whatever it is we do to react to him. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So whatever we do as people of color to react to what he does, he's already factored that in. Because it's just all about paying attention to him. Mm-hmm. It's all about paying attention to him. Mm-hmm. And using fear, again, to train you to focus your attention in your lower brain. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. He has got you so hooked up into the lower stem, which is the reptilian energy, what he calls the lower brain, the primal brain. Mm-hmm. That brain is based on reaction, hatred, survival, ego, all about me, safety, mm-hmm. eat to survive, reproduce. That's all that brain is about. Mm-hmm. It's the brain that the lower man, his brain. Mm-hmm. Okay? When we began to become lower, here's the metaphysics. When we began to fall deeper and deeper into the realms of matter from where we came, we began to create creatures that were made from the reptilian energy. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So we began to create him through the fact that we began to create ourselves in the image of ego, in the image of self-centeredness. So what does that do except create technologies of destruction and hatred and killing? Mm-hmm. So who else is he except an outgrowth of what it is that we pistol shitted out? Mm-hmm. Because if we are the original man, and he is a copy of the man, or a structure that looks like a man, where would he have come from? And if we created him, where was our mentality at that time? That we think we needed to create a recessive in order to do our work. Mm-hmm. Think about that. A lot of people
Are you saying that we consciously created him?
No. I think that what happened was we, in our unconsciousness of ourselves, created him.
In our unconsciousness of ourselves created
exactly.
him.
Exactly.
Our unconsciousness of ourselves
yeah.
created him.
Mm-hmm. Or our lack of consciousness within ourselves, or the fact that we were failing to have the consciousness of the ancestors there, we began to degenerate. And in our degeneracy, we couldn't do anything but create a creature like that.
So he is a reflection of the negative pole in our being?
He is the expression that was inert to us. What we kept in balance came out of balance, and he came to being. Mm-hmm. You see, he is the evidence of imbalance and disproportionateness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if he is a creation of us, like the people who have the theory of Yaku, mm-hmm. if he is created by us, what was in our minds at the time to open up a laboratory to create this creature? Mm-hmm. We must have been out of our minds. Mm-hmm. You think about that. We would say, well, we created Yaku. He was a Yaku scientist created that creature, man. He ain't nothing but a genetic one. Yeah, well, what were we thinking about creating? Where'd we go? What was we doing? We must have been out of our skulls to be creating something like that. That's the story of him coming back and destroying the creator. Now, you look at Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. Frankenstein would be created, didn't know who he was, got an insane brain rather than the brain that they wanted to put in him, right? Mm-hmm. And then he goes out and starts killing everything. Kill his creator, kill everybody. What else but that? Ain't he Frankenstein come back? If that's the Yaku scenario, mm-hmm. then he got to be what we created coming back to kill us off. Then we some dumb motherfuckers. Why would we even think about creating a creature like that unless we were insane? Mm-hmm. And ain't he nothing but a reflection of the Creator, His Creator? So if we take responsibility for creating Him, where were we what mind were we in when we created Him? And then we getting back what it is that we set as karma to ourselves?
With that in mind, I mean, that is another scenario. That is another way of looking at it. That's the opposite side of the Yaku, and I can see that. I mean, but that's not the only theory out there.
Right.
But it is a theory, and there are other theories that do support that He is different from us.
Oh, He knows it.
Everybody says, all black folk in their rightful mind say that He's different, in their rightful mind.
White people in their rightful mind know He's different. He got books, science, he got scientific journals that say he's different.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, now, I know they study melanin, and they come out, but talk about that. I think that's...
Yeah, some work was done in the 1920s, and in another tape I'll get all the actual facts for you as far as the books and the names of the books and the people who wrote it. And there were books that were done by white scientists, German scientists who went to Ethiopia and went to study in the Congo and different parts of Africa. And the information they compiled outside the racist material, the information that the scientists were putting down based on scientific theory, how you go about the process, the scientific process, all showed that the physiology of the African man, or what was called the African man at that time, the black man, was completely different from that of the white. The gradation was a polarity of differences. In other words, there were things that were deficient in the black man that became dominant in the white.
What is that?
Well, the fact that he had the inability to process color out of his food. See? That's another thing. His digestive juices are not the same as ours. When he gets hypertension, for instance, in his blood, his hypertension is based in his kidneys. Whereas our hypertension is based in our heart and our liver. And all of this is documented. So his pills and his drugs have more metal in them. We can't take more metal. We have to take more natural substances. And he knows that. He documented that. But yet still you over here taking the pills that he gives to white people too. And you wonder why you ain't getting any better. He knows the differences because he did copious amounts of information on studying all the creatures of space. Matter of fact, with Darwin, took it to a whole new level of studying the intricacies of life. Darwin began putting down, and Darwin was out of his mind too. He was a little bit out of mind because he was a chronic masturbator. So when you're masturbating all the time and trying to think at the same time, you're insane. So you can't really see the big picture when you're crazy like that. But in the annals of the recessive minds or the recessive races consciousness assessment of the planet, he did serious analogies and experimentations on black people and saw that they were inherently, physiologically, biologically different from the Caucasoid. There were gradations and polarities of differences, which I gave you a assumption, for instance, where, for instance, what he found is that there's a substance called bilirubin that is created in the blood. The bilirubin is what turns your waste feces brown in digestion, for instance. Bilirubin in him and bilirubin in us is processed differently. We don't recycle bilirubin the way he does. He has an inefficient or a very poor way of processing iron because he doesn't have it laid up in his skin like we do. The color you have there is not only the melanin, but the presence of the iron oxide there, the iron isotope that is what turns you the brown that you are. When you see the pigment changing or spots, that's the laying up of certain iron crystals in certain parts of your body. As you get older, the iron is not being processed properly throughout the skin. So it gets into freckles or spots, what do you call age spots and things like that. That's the iron itself. He cannot process iron. very well. That's why he needs to drink constantly. That's why you notice him in movies. When he opens up a scene to a movie, he's constantly pouring a glass of liquor. Because that's the way he processes iron from his system. We do the same thing. But our problem is that we don't process iron from our skins into our bloodstream very well. So what we do is because we lack vitamin E. And that's what we used to have in abundance in our food source and what we ate in Africa based on what we cultivated from the ground. But because we don't have the vitamin E to process the iron in our body, we drink that 40. You see. There is a marked difference between the black physiology and the white physiology, and that's the spiritual secret that is definitely being kept from peoples of color.
Now, isn't this a result of environment and the ecology? I mean, you're derived from some areas that have a lot of certain minerals and so forth in the ground or whatever. You're talking about vitamin E.
Right.
We got that from our food. I mean, Europe had like of certain things within that environment.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that be just a matter of ecology?
Well, no, it would be a matter of, again, the planet. Well, not ecology, more than environment and the interfacing of peoples, the movement of peoples around the planet to set up in an environment that will be conducive for them. The environment dictates what it is that you will do and become within it. And that's why it's the environment that tells you what the name of your God is.
Very interesting.
When the white man went around the world and took the language from everybody and gave it to his, that's when you began seeing more of the storms, the pestilence, and so forth. Because why? The sound current for God in a particular region, by your interfacing with the environment, the sound light current begins to speak to you on wavelengths and frequencies that you now interpret through the voice and through your language as the name of God. So when the language was taken away and the rituals that you used to do in that environment to create the balance and give thanks for what the environment gave you, that was the way you harmonized with the environment. By calling God and keeping that particular signature of that frequency in place by your singing and dancing and drumming and what it is your environment gave you to do. Once you changed the language and rooted the people from it, that sound frequency had to be balanced in another way. So it would cause storms and all kinds of craziness to rebalance itself. But now the planet's getting ready to go through a heavy change. Because of the fact that all of what we are now is becoming this one drone of a monoculture where we are thinking along the specific conduit and highway of this recessive. The whole world is dressing like him.
Correct.
The whole world thinks like him according to economy and to currency as far as money and so forth. So we don't have the quilt that would go into making all of the different societies around the planet. We don't have the checks and balances of frequencies and harmonics that different people set up in their respective places and environments. So now the world is getting crazy. Earthquakes, all kind of crazy things are happening in response to our lack of keeping that homeostasis in place. You see.
I can see that would be a natural relationship.
Oh yes.
You know, but what is the, as you see it, what is the end results?
Well, the earth will then strike her own balance. And by striking her own balance, it's going to be a trauma.
And, okay, maybe you want to talk about that.
Well, there is going to be supposedly a magnetic lull on the planet within the next, I'd say 12 years, 11, 12 years.
A magnetic low?
Low, yes. The magnetic field of the planet is dropping.
And what does that mean?
It means that the Earth is slowing up to stop spinning. And this happened about 13,000 years ago.
The Earth stopped spinning.
The Earth stopped spinning. It's in your Bible. The sun stood still, the Earth stood still.
Yeah, what?
And it rose in the west and set in the east. Because what happened is, well, here's what the ancestors knew. The ancestors knew that every 26,000 years you had a yuga. The ancestors call it a yuga. Every 26,000 years was the precession of the equinoxes. But every 26,000 years, there was also a phenomenon that took place that caused the spinning of the earth to stop. And it would happen in cycles. Every 26,000 years, or every 13,000 years, the earth would stop spinning for about 2 or 3 days, spin back in the other direction, going counterclockwise to where it was going, and then begin again to spin back in the negative direction, the same direction. And each time that happened, consciousness rose. When the magnetic field of the planet drops and the electrical field goes up, consciousness soars to the roof. That's the secret behind the chemtrails.
All right, talk about that. Oh, well, before we get into this, we're going to get into the chemtrails, but I think it's necessary now for me to pull in the last gathering of the masters in Atlanta. I want to tie this in because
sure.
This is the proper place to put it in. And our brother, who I admire and love, our brother Khalid Muhammad, and brother Rasta, but particularly brother Khalid, made the point that, and he acknowledged the beautiful work that both you did and Bobby Hemmett did, but he questioned whether it was wise to put so much emphasis on metaphysics when we are a people who are at the crossroads of being exterminated. And so the question that I want to pose, and I think a lot of people will be on the same wavelength, is when we are dealing with metaphysics and we are looking at our political, economic, physical condition down here, our lack of control of our environment, our communities, not having access to controlling our economy, the struggle we're having with schools, fighting one another, and all of it being perpetuated, created by the European who.
When he gets hypertension, for instance, in his blood, his hypertension is based in his kidneys, whereas our hypertension is based in our heart and our liver. And all of this is documented. So he does, his pills and his drugs have more metal in them. We can't take more metal. We have to take more natural substances. And he knows that. He documented that. But yet still you over here taking the pills that he gives to white people too. And you wonder why you ain't getting any better. He knows the differences because he did copious amounts of information on studying all the creatures of space. Matter of fact, with Darwin, took it to a whole new level of studying the intricacies of life. Darwin began putting down, and Darwin was out of his mind too. He was a little bit out of mind because he was a chronic masturbator. So when you're masturbating all the time and trying to think at the same time, you are insane. So you can't really see the big picture when you're crazy like that. But in the annals of the recessive minds or the recessive races consciousness assessment of the planet, he did serious analogies and experimentations on black people and saw that they were inherently, physiologically, biologically different from the Caucasoid. There were gradations and polarities of differences, which I gave you a assumption, for instance, where, for instance, what he found is that there's a substance called bilirubin that is created in the blood. The bilirubin is what turns your waste feces brown in digestion, for instance. Bilirubin in him and bilirubin in us is processed differently. We don't recycle bilirubin the way he does. He has an inefficient or a very poor way of processing iron because he doesn't have it laid up in his skin like we do. The color you have there is not only the melanin, but the presence of the iron oxide there, the iron isotope that is what turns you the brown that you are. When you see the pigment changing or spots, that's the laying up of certain iron crystals in certain parts of your body. As you get older, the iron is not being processed properly throughout the skin. So it gets into freckles or spots, what do you call age spots and things like that. That's the iron itself. He cannot process iron very well. That's why he needs to drink constantly. That's why you notice him in movies. When he opens up a scene to a movie, he's constantly pouring a glass of liquor. Because that's the way he processes iron from his system. We do the same thing. But our problem is that we don't process iron from our skins into our bloodstream very well. So what we do is because we lack vitamin E. And that's what we used to have in abundance in our food source and what we ate in Africa based on what we cultivated from the ground. But because we don't have the vitamin E to process the iron in our body, we drink that 40. You see. There is a marked difference between the black physiology and the white physiology, and that's the spiritual secret that is definitely being kept from peoples of color.
Now, isn't this a result of environment and the ecology? I mean, you're derived from some areas that have a lot of certain minerals and so forth in the ground or whatever. You're talking about vitamin E.
Right.
We got that from our food. I mean, Europe had like of certain things within that environment.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that be just a matter of ecology?
Well, no, it would be a matter of, again, the planet. Well, not ecology, more than environment and the interfacing of peoples, the movement of peoples around the planet to set up in an environment that will be conducive for them. The environment dictates what it is that you will do and become within it. And that's why it's the environment that tells you what the name of your God is.
Very interesting.
When the white man went around the world and took the language from everybody and gave it to his, that's when you began seeing more of the storms, the pestilence, and so forth. Because why? The sound current for God in a particular region, by your interfacing with the environment, the sound light current begins to speak to you on wavelengths and frequencies that you now interpret through the voice and through your language as the name of God. So when the language was taken away and the rituals that you used to do in that environment to create the balance and give thanks for what the environment gave you, that was the way you harmonized with the environment. By calling God and keeping that particular signature of that frequency in place by your singing and dancing and drumming and what it is your environment gave you to do. Once you changed the language and rooted the people from it, that sound frequency had to be balanced in another way. So it would cause storms and all kinds of craziness to rebalance itself. But now the planet's getting ready to go through a heavy change. Because of the fact that all of what we are now is becoming this one drone of a monoculture where we are thinking along the specific conduit and highway of this recessive. The whole world is dressing like him.
Correct.
The whole world thinks like him according to economy and to currency as far as money and so forth. So we don't have the quilt that would go into making all of the different societies around the planet. We don't have the checks and balances of frequencies and harmonics that different people set up in their respective places and environments. So now the world is getting crazy. Earthquakes, all kind of crazy things are happening in response to our lack of keeping that homeostasis in place. You see.
I can see that would be a natural relationship.
Oh, yes.
You know, but what is the, as you see it, what is the end result?
Well, the earth will then strike her own balance. And by striking her own balance, it's going to be a trauma.
And, okay, maybe you want to talk about that.
Well, there is going to be supposedly a magnetic lull on the planet within the next, I'd say 12 years, 11, 12 years.
A magnetic low?
Low, yes. The magnetic field of the planet is dropping.
And what does that mean?
It means that the Earth is slowing up to stop spinning. And this happened about 13,000 years ago.
The earth stopped spinning.
The earth stopped spinning. It's in your Bible. The sun stood still, the earth stood still.
Yeah, what?
And it rose in the west and set in the east.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happened is,
reversed.
yeah, well, here's what the ancestors knew. The ancestors knew that every 26,000 years, you had a yuga. That's what the ancestors called it, a yuga. Every 26,000 years was the precession of the equinoxes. But every 26,000 years, there was also a phenomenon that took place that caused the spinning of the earth to stop. And it would happen in cycles. Mm-hmm. Every 26,000 years, or every 13,000 years, the earth would stop spinning for about 2 or 3 days, spin back in the other direction, going counterclockwise to where it was going, mm-hmm. and then begin again to spin back in the negative direction, the same direction. And each time that happened, consciousness rose. Mm-hmm. When the magnetic field of the planet drops and the electrical field goes up, consciousness soars to the roof. That's the secret behind the chemtrails.
All right, talk about that. Oh, but before we get into this, mm-hmm. we're going to get into the chemtrails, but I think it's necessary now for me to pull in the last gathering of the masters in Atlanta. Mm. I want to tie this in because sure. This is the proper place to put it in. Mm-hmm. And our brother, who I admire and love, mm-hmm. Our brother Khalid, mm-hmm. Muhammad, and brother Rasta, but particularly brother Khalid, mm-hmm. Made the point that, and he acknowledged the beautiful work that both you did and Bobby Hemmett did, but he questioned whether it was wise to put so much emphasis on metaphysics when we are a people who are at the crossroads of being exterminated. And so the question that I want to pose, and I think a lot of people will be on the same wavelength, is when we are dealing with metaphysics and we are looking at our political, economic, physical condition down here, our lack of control of our environment, our communities, not having access to controlling our economy, the struggle we're having with schools, fighting one another, and all of it being perpetuated, created by the European who controls the systems, who controls the communities, who has lock, stock, and barrel on the economies in all these communities, controlling the monies and making sure that you don't get to open up your own economy and control your own environment through your communities and so forth in the education of your children. So the question was, you're talking about things of a spiritual nature, green men, spaceships, and all this bullshit, and you're getting a lot of people looking that way as opposed to trying to deal with some concrete methodology. Mm-hmm. Of kicking this white man in his fucking ass right here, right now. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to interject this so that now you can begin to explain how this is relevant and how it does deal with our problems in a very concrete way. Mm-hmm. And I think you've already laid down a foundation. So maybe you'll just expand on that now.
Okay. Well, I'd like to pick up on what the brother was saying, because a lot of what he is saying essentially is based on an old formula. A formula that has been decoded and regulated to his archives of conquest. Mm-hmm. I'd like to know what it is that brothers like himself is about to interject into the equation that we are in that will create the inspiration to follow him other than anger and the reactive mind. Because what they're doing is appealing to the lower reptilian brain. React, kick ass, do what you're doing. But we ain't got no solutions. You have to first raise the mindset of people. You have to raise the intelligence quotient of the people you wish to address. If you're just simply putting them into the reactive mind, they become rabble. Now, I empathize with the thought that the white man needs an ass kicking. Everybody knows that. But if Martin, if Malcolm, if Brother Marcus, and these are the three that we use here, what I call the three wise men, who came, as well as actually, not only Malcolm, but actually Honorable Elijah Muhammad, if the three of them came here and offered up three what looked like different philosophies or strategies for conquest or for the solution to our problem, then what is it about that formula that each one of them introduced in their own way that failed? What is it that we are now going to interject into the equation that the recessive adversary has not already pondered upon, created the counter moves to, and has set the structure of retaliation and suppression in place, both psychological, physiological, militarily, all of it? What particular stratagem, what particular weaponry, what particular form or structure of consistency to wage a war that they're claiming that we need to wage? What are the resources that we have that will sustain a war such as that? Is it just our attention? Is there a battle plan? Are there enough people that you can trust with that battle plan that will implement in their individual places that they go to? If the people that you are targeting with your knowledge, if the people that you're targeting with this particular strategy is not ready for the sacrifice involved in doing that, then how is it that you're saying that we are diverting our attention by teaching the person that we speak to, or the people we speak to, how to look into a situation, how to look into a condition from the inside out rather than the outside in, reacting in that way? What we do and what we teach in metaphysics is to bring the memory of another form of thinking back to our peoples. We are not simply pacifying our people. In fact, if you understood metaphysics, we are giving them a whole nother level of to become focused in for a whole new form of rage. The rage that we use today has already been checkmated. I bless Brother Khalid for all that he has done. He was like the big brother that you couldn't mess with as the little brother. You can go and do what you're doing because you had a big brother that would always stand up for you. Mm-hmm. His whole part was that he came before the strategy. He came before his time. The strategy is to raise consciousness to a level where the people in that consciousness is ready for a sustained battle. We don't have anybody here ready for a sustained battle. All we are doing is appealing to the reactive mind. Mm-hmm. Once you have people saying that we just diverting from the political, that's all illusion. That's our consensus to agree that this is what the truth is, and it's not the truth. There's no such thing as an economy with 12 and 15 trillion dollars in it. There's not that much money on the planet. They are all figures and numbers that are based on suppositions and hypothetics. We are dealing in a world where the reaction to the reality that they have has already been factored. It's a game of chess. So when Brother Conscious Rasta tells me that what I say is just about little green men, I ain't talking about green men, and I have never said there was any green men. There's nowhere in my vocabulary were there green men from Mars. I said we were once green, which means that we were on this earth. And you could go to Senegal now and see people that are so black they look blue when they shine in the sun. And there's people sometimes so black you can look over their eyes and see green. And that was real. I'm talking from real. But you see, who we are, not just African greatness and all this, once we get to the part where they really don't want us to ascend to, and that is our God selves, the higher potencies, who we are as the so-called creators of this particular reality, once we get to that, then we rip apart the threshold. We tear through the ceiling that they've been giving to us to operate under, the ceiling of the reactive mind. Once we do that, that's what's been frightening them. They know they have to keep us suppressed. That's why they were so particularly pissed off with Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, because when Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Dr. Van Sertima, when all of our, Amos Wilson, when everybody began to decode the fraud of this white man, they knew that was the next step to recapturing the spiritual component to what they got from us, which they hide in the form of masonry and their Rosicrucians and so forth. Most of that they're doing is just a damn clubhouse mentality. Most of these Masons don't know their asshole from their elbow when it comes to metaphysics. They don't know shit about that. That's because they've been kept that way. The ones like the Council of 13, those motherfuckers, those are the ones who understand who we are. They know who we are. And they know that we are a spirit-based people. We're not a physical-based people. And the reason why we are conquered is because we keep reacting in the physical base. Why do you think they took your language? Why do you think they changed your name to Toby? It's because in the resonance in your language, in your culture. Why do you think they stopped the ghost dance from happening for the Native Americans? Because it's a culture and it spreads like the 100th monkey protocol. The 100th monkey is that once you begin to start thinking on spiritual lines, people across the planet begin to pick up what it is you pick up. You didn't have to say nothing to them. And they did that. There was this thing where they did an experimentation where on one island, I think it was one monkey went down and took the tuber that she had with the baby on her back, went down to the water and washed it off before she fed the child with it. And she was doing it by herself. She just kept washing it off. None of the other monkeys would do that. But then after a while, a few of the other monkeys joined her down at the woody corner, and they began washing theirs. And before you know it, all of the monkeys on that island were washing their potatoes before they ate it. Guess what? Monkeys that were not even connected to them, of a whole other genus on another island, began doing the same thing. So they know that it isn't a physical thing with us. It's a spiritual thing with us. And the way you translate spirit is through the metaphysics. And once we began to give you the inner components to deconstruct this Caucasoid, you can't deconstruct this Caucasoid according to what he has given you. Well, he's this and he's a beast and he's a... That shit ain't saying nothing. But when you deconstruct him spiritually, it's like, whoa, you can't take me apart that way because I already got my illusion out about myself. I already told you who I was. If you start digging in and tearing that particular veneer down, and you start pulling aside the curtain, and you begin to see who it is that the wizard really is. Now he's pissing because you see he ain't nothing but an old white man pushing up a whole lot of levers and machines to tell you who he is. He ain't that big, great, and powerful Oz that you think he is. And that's the frightening part of it. Once that condition of mind is changed, once the people begin to see their spirituality, but you see, he's slick. He's playing chess with spirit. So what does he do? He begins to build and put more money into the churches. There is a serious influx of the church influence now in our communities, more so than ever. We're building cathedrals in the poorest parts of Africa. Huge marble cathedrals are going up. Why? Because they know that the spiritual component of the 100th monkey is beginning to catch fire. And we will wake up when we start understanding this metaphysics. So he has to put the money into the churches because now the churches can start refining and containing spiritual growth inside of that encapsulated version called religion. So the preacher man now becomes the diversionary point for all the young people whose new spirituality is waking up in them, who by the work of me and a lot of brothers like myself and sisters and brothers in Africa and all around the world who are speaking that, even the white boys here are picking up on it because they're going to their Maharishi to speak on, to listen and learn and shit. They're understanding that that spiritual component wipes out all of this bullshit. So, yeah, especially Conscious Rasta, when he said that he was going to plot to destroy the gathering of the masters, to bring it down. Him and Di Bernardo and Khalid. They didn't know what they were doing. They did not know what they were doing. That what Bobby and I represent, we ain't over there playing games and bullshitting. We are code breakers. Their code breaking days were maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. At the time when we had the fever to go and march with our guns in the streets and have the people behind us. But today, people running into churches for their what is that? Their interpretation of the times. It's bullshit. They got us locked down in that light code lockdown. And until we start decoding the information without religion, without politics, without education, see, all of these are the distractions. When we begin to decode the information based upon what it is that dozens of us begin to do now, without the help of religion, without the help of nationalism, all the isms that make us contain ourselves. Once we do that, then something becomes clear. You strip away the clothes. They say the clothes makes the man. You're damn right the clothes makes the man. I can make a wet bag of shit look appealing and you want to buy it. But that's exactly what he's done. He has clothed a wet bag of shit and we are buying it wholesale. They can't keep it on the shelves long enough.
You know, you say something very interesting when you talk about decoding and worlds of reality. You spoke of, when I said worlds of reality, you spoke of them going at our religion, them going at our gods or deities, that the way that we worship, the way we relate to nature, the way we relate to ourselves through our spirit, the matrix that was set up for us to interact with nature. Therefore, to attack our gods, you know, to say that's evil. You better not speak your language.
Right.
We beat the hell out of you, kill you if you speak in your own language and everything. Now, people go every day and cut on the television.
Right.
And they are fascinated. They pick up a telephone, well, they really don't think anything of it, with the exception that they think that this is science, and science belongs to the white man, and the European have discovered this. But in the world that they destroyed, through taking away our language and our culture, our ancestors could set up a bowl of water and look at it. And just like you cut the TV on, they looked in the bowl of water and saw reality around the world.
True that.
And the telephone is merely a receiver and a transmitter.
That's right.
And there's more than one way to make a receiver and a transmitter.
Amen.
And once I think you begin to break these things down to our people, and I want you to speak on this, because this is where I think that the problem lies in a lot of us not understanding that what you're bringing is a new dimension to the same problem.
Exactly.
As opposed to trying to solve the problem through the same mechanism that the European has created to divert you from your world.
Exactly.
So I wanted you to talk about that world. I know you've already spoke on why they had to take your language from you, and in particular your deities from you.
Yes.
But go into that and then bring that together in this attack on the metaphysical.
Okay.
As it not being relevant.
Exactly.
You know, but I think that if you put these two together, I
Right.
think we can
I think you've done a wonderful job. It's almost like your question is rhetorical.
Yeah, I ain't on the film though.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get you in front of you soon. But it's very pertinent that you actually couched the conversation inside of that. The attack on the metaphysical community. We don't know that we attack ourselves when you attack the metaphysical community. Mm-hmm. Because at the time when in your village you had your witch doctors and the people who were the seers, those are the first people that your chiefs went to. You see? Now, because we've been Christianized or Islamicized, we now have this thing where you can talk to God, but if God talks to you, you're crazy. Mm-hmm. Well, then who am I talking to? So what's more valid about me talking to a God, and what's less valid about me getting answers? And that's the mentality that the Caucasoid, the recessive, is set up. To doubt your spiritual abilities. To doubt that someone else can do it, because now you've been taught that you got the flavor, you're individual. Not understanding that there's a step-down process that our ancestors used to say, that's a seer. From the womb you knew who you were. Mm-hmm. Took your child out, showed it to the seer, that's who came back. We knew. We didn't have to need all this white man's equipment and stuff. You said something very important about the fact that we have, not only did they destroy our language, but when they have destroyed our connectedness to even perceive that something is possible, they have cut us off from all of our potential. You see? So, to tell me that metaphysics is irrelevant is to stub your own toe. Because I am, and Bobby, and Delbert, and everyone who is in that framework, trying to do our best to resurrect what was suppressed. The only thing that has been allowed to resurrect, because they understand that that is the direct confrontation, is the militant side of ourselves. That's why they pour the guns into our community, because they know that they have that under control. Mm-hmm. But what we represent, they have no control on it.
How do they have the guns under control?
Well, they give us the guns so that we could fire at them, so that they could have the excuse to fire at us.
And they got the bigger guns.
And they got the biggest guns.
Okay.
And that's why you see them now. They're going back into nuclear experimentations. Mm-hmm. They understand that a whole lot of people have to die for them to have this new world order to be in place. There's too many surplus people. And that surplus came based upon their practicing on how to take over.
I don't understand.
In other words, you create conditions where people are poor, no longer control their own environment. Poverty immediately causes a triggering of the birth rate. Mm. And now you have these surplus humans that you don't need, what they call the useless eaters. They're trying to get rid of all of them now. And they are. They're going to start it. You're going to see mass exterminations. You got an idea in Rwanda, but it's getting ready to come down. They have to get rid of a certain amount of people. They have to depopulate Africa in order to take it over. And that's where all the land is now, and that's where they're going back. Mm-hmm. They understand what that is about. Mm-hmm. Now, when we no longer believe that something is possible and probable, it is no longer available, and therefore, within our own psyche, that means it is no longer attainable. Mm-hmm. To tell, for Christianity to divert our attention to spiritual self into a pre-written script mm-hmm. about a savior. See, that's the thing. Well, you got to look at the psychobabble and the mind fuck that's going on in here. To divert what they know to be an enormous spiritual power of black people here in the belly of the beasts away from its truest potential, to really cause problems here for white people, you divert it into a parameter, into a construct of behavior that maintains your control. Mm-hmm. When you have spiritual minds thinking that a Savior named Jesus Christ is coming back to save them, you have already bottled the genie. The magic can't happen when the genie is in the bottle. And the genie is in church. So, spiritual energies being diverted into the Christ model is to divert it into the altars and into the power structure of this recessive. We give him life because we give him the attention. And people don't understand that your attention is an energy. That thought is an energy. That everything we do when we focus thought becomes a living principle. We create life with our thoughts. So if our thoughts are preoccupied with Jesus, we give life to Jesus. When our thoughts are no longer preoccupied with Olodumare, Olodumare dies. Or the connection to the power that we identify as Olodumare dies. That particular conduit, the synapse that gives us the signals, the energies, the information directly from the earth source is severed. Because our attention is now on what this devil created as this artificial golden cow. That you see in your Bible that they erected when Moses left them. And this is exactly what this beast knows. He knows the psychology of control. And to resurrect the seed, and what the brothers and sisters don't realize out there, is that the work that we are doing to decode and to become code breakers is planting a spiritual / metaphysical seed into the fields of the etheric and akashic planes. And that will give life to a whole new dynamic, a whole new genus, a whole new species is being created by what it is that we're doing. You don't see it yet, but you will see it in the children that will come. Because the very words we're speaking has a volume and an energy that will begin to establish itself. Whereas children are going to start waking up, people are going to start thinking a whole other way, and all of a sudden, the people that are in place are not going to know what to do with it, and that's exactly why they are now spraying all these poisons. They're getting ready to spray like malathion again. Are you familiar with that? Do you know they're going to come back again?
I don't know, but it might be the reason I end up in the hospital almost dead. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me tell you something. They're getting ready to spray again with malathion and another kind of poison right here in this city, starting in April. They're going to start spraying with malathion. They're going to deal with destruction. And all of it, brother, mark my words, all of it is consciousness suppression.
Now, is this, everybody would spray it. Is there something, it will smell it, it will get in everybody, but will it react with melanated people different than...
Well, what is happening is they can't spray one thing to try to get you over. They got to spray a series of different types of genetic things, genetically mutated materials. So they have what they call the genetically mutated viruses, genetically created bacteria, and stuff that is going to start training your genetics to accept them. So they are terraforming.
Explain that.
Well, what these masters are doing, and I explained it at the Gathering of the Masters, which is why when the people really see what the Gathering of the Masters was and what it is I spoke about, it's called nanogenetic mind control. Where they don't have to put chips into your head no more. What they do is they genetically begin to train your genetics to adapt to the behavior that they want you to adapt to.
No, how is that done?
Okay, when you begin to spray and put all kinds of poisons and toxins, you cause problems in the genetics. You destroy DNA. You disconnect certain kinds of helixes. You destroy the actual pattern that is supposed to be created to receive it. If something happens to the wiring in that, there's no signal. Same thing with your genetics. When they begin to distort the genetics or prevent the genetics, what they call the junk material in your genetics, from coming together to create the mold and the model of a higher being, they create a mind-controlled slave that is based upon a new form of instinct. So what they're doing is conditioning a new instinct into you so that you will react without them even having to deal with you anymore. You will react based upon the environment that they set up. And you will react because they have seeded your environment with specific toxins and poisons that will destabilize your consciousness. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So you give me food that has no seeds. Food that I could sit up on a shelf for a year. Mm-hmm. Foods that have no information, because in the nanogenetics I said that the seed carries the information. Mm-hmm. If you have a fruit that has no information in it, what are you receiving from the earth? Because when you eat from the earth, you are communicating directly from Mother Nature. Mm-hmm. When she has none of her seeds in there, which tells you what that is. In other words, the seeds of the consciousness of the fruits. It tells you what fruit you have. You don't know if there's no seeds in there. What the hell are you eating? We don't know what we're eating. Mm-hmm. If there's no seeds, then that may not be a grape. It may be a shrunken pear. Mm-hmm. It may be something completely different, but they are playing with what they call cross-pollination of genetics. And they are crossing everything. They're crossing pigs with tomatoes, cross species, and they're putting it all together to mix up your genetics. Mm-hmm. You see? So that you don't get the proper signals that's going to start beaming in on this planet when that magnetic field drops. Mm-hmm. It's going to be deep in here.
Mm-hmm. But you raised two questions, Phil. I want to come back to this. I just want to throw this in. One, you lift a white man in doing this to a thinking, calculating, very intelligent species who had the intelligence and the foresight to understand not only who we were, but how to destabilize, undermine, and control. Mm-hmm. And you said that he knew what he was doing, and that he went into Africa and seeded a new religion and a new way of thinking and all of that as a plan, long-range plan, which means then that we are dealing with a very intelligent whatever.
Now we're getting into the part that people say is flaky. See, there's a part of this particular equation that if you bring it into the particular conversation, that's when the naysayers and the detractors start saying, oh, you're getting into boogeymen again. But there was never a time when life was not on this planet. We are millions of years old. Mm-hmm. And there are entities living on different planets and different solar systems and galaxies who have agendas with one another, who have arguments with one another, just like we do with different peoples down here. Same thing goes on a wider galactic scheme of things. We are the least informed of people because we are so completely oblivious to the neighborhood that we live in this cocoon. Mm-hmm. And we are maintained in this cocoon. You realize that there are hundreds of thousands of people living on Mars right now? You know,
no, I ain't had no idea.
No, humans.
No, this is where the attack comes
This
from.
is where the attack
This is where...
This is the attack because...
This is where Khalid was saying.
Yes, exactly. But you see, if we don't
we
know
need
that,
to deal with these white folk down here.
But see, the white folks down here and the ones up there are the ones that's getting ready to deal with a whole new intergalactic diaspora. Are you be ready for that?
Well...
See, again, if we start speaking where, how did this white man get so damn smart so quick? Remember, we was training his ass. He didn't come into Kemet just to see the view as a tourist and then leave. He didn't come into Abu Simbel and to Timbuktu. These were his places where he nurtured. And remember, what he took with the information, he brought back to his savage emperors. And they took that to their scientists who weren't initiates and started to cultivate their own mentality. But yes, he is intelligent.
Okay, all right. You're saying that the European was seeded here from another...
No, I didn't say that.
All right, well, explain.
I'm saying that he has help.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
All right,
Okay.
Because if I take it any deeper, everybody, well, how do you prove? I'm just going to say he has help, because that's going to be a whole other tape of another 3 or 4 hours decoding that.
Okay.
But you see, he has help. And the one he's getting help for is the one that defeated us.
Defeated us. When and where?
Great War. You think that Kemet was a desert? Let me ask you a question. Does everybody believe that our civilization came up in a damn desert?
No, I mean, but
what did it look like?
They say that it used to be green.
Yes. How did it become a damn desert?
But the weather.
Nah, bullshit. Nah. See, that's what I was saying. The evidence is not being scientifically broken down through metaphysical lenses. It's being given and spoon-fed to people. And we are the most shallow of peoples. You know that there's a subterranean pyramid and stairs that lead damn near to the other side of Tibet and places from right under the pyramid? Do you know that there are levels and chambers deep below the pyramid that you know nothing about? Do you know that the pyramid is triangulated to another pyramid on Mars, but that the pyramid here on this earth is essentially a mountain that was actually created in order to stabilize the wobble of a planet, and that it was created in order to create a chamber that would destroy the magnetic frequencies, so that the electrical frequencies that the planet naturally used to do would then take off, and you could communicate to Orion and to Sirius, the very stars that they tell you that those things are triangulated to.
Mm-hmm.
See, who our ancestors were is what, and this is the slick part of the psychology. Remember, he's tricknology.
Mm-hmm.
What he has done to the activities of our people in the ancient times is put them into comic book form.
Mm-hmm.
And thus separated you from the reality that he hides within the stories of his own myth. But the superhuman things that they're finding out that this black man used to do, they're assigning to their superhero white men.
Mm-hmm.
And you are thinking, because you are caught up in his paradigm, that he is flating his own ego, when he's actually taking your stories and building up what he does not have.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a spiritual history.
Mm-hmm. Two things, and
Mm-hmm.
I bridge what you're saying. Only from looking, I told you, Subonfo and Melodoma Some.
Mm-hmm.
Melodoma Some from Burkina Faso.
Right.
His book of Water and Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
though he does not say exactly what you're saying, he talks about the rituals that they went through, and when he went through going from boyhood to manhood, one of the rituals. But he talks about the elders creating a door, an entry into another world, which you had to jump into, which as a boy going through this initiation, it was an initiation where all of the young men went through processes which brought them into different dimensions and other worlds, and that these things were real to them. That is the world in which the European, through Christianity and Islam and etc.,
Attempts to enter.
Attempts to enter, but attempts to
Shut down.
destroy our world,
Mm-hmm.
traditional
But he attempts to enter.
spirituality,
Yeah.
and take it over, and
Mm-hmm.
through his, but to shut ours off. Now, I only said that to say that when you talk about these other dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
within our own culture, if you look at that it was common, and this was all over Africa, through your initiations and your ceremonies, we went into other dimensions and into other worlds.
Mm-hmm. What is it? Okay.
Them.
All right, that's what I'm saying. Now let me ask you a question. What is initiation?
An initiation, as described by him, is the death of one consciousness or the rebirth of another consciousness.
Then what is it except the switching of attention?
Correct.
That's what this whole thing is about. We, Bobby and myself, and people like myself, are teaching the aspects of initiation. What they had as a consolidated spiritual experience, because they were contained, they were protected, they were in the folds of their elders. We don't have that anymore, brother. The information now has to be disseminated the best way that we can. And Bobby and I are putting things out there in hopes of waking up the sleeping and latent part of ourselves that is there, accustomed to switching our attention, accustomed to switching into whole other realities, studying whole other parts of ourselves. That's who we are, man. What is this initiation except to switch your attention? The attention was switched by creating a world that had nothing to do with this world. And that world was first seeded through all the things you did before you jumped. You see? Because you have to change the mind. You have to change the focus. You have to destroy what is tangible to you now in order to interface with what it is that you had perceived and cast into that doorway. See, what they didn't know of what you were being taught is what was in that doorway was what they already put in there, not what was there waiting for them. Because then that would have been a preconception. What they went in and found was something that they were, by the conditioning of their ancestors and their elders, they conditioned them to think about what they would be, to imagine what it is, to teach them to drink potions, to go into different places, so that when they did go through the door, they did not find this reality there. They already had where they were going in their heads, they just didn't define it until they got there. Because what were they teaching them except you are whatever it is that you think you are. And and they have that old saying, wherever you go, there you are. You see? So I don't know what his expressions and what he teaches of initiation, but I do know how to explain whatever it is that he may say, you know, he had experienced there, so that people could understand it.
Now, you say that